welcome to today's webinar, Over the Top and the Cloud, How New Regulations and Laws Could Stifle Innovation and Growth, presented by INCOMPAS, the Internet and Competitive Networks Association. We are so pleased that you could join us for today's event as the INCOMPAS team takes a look at the current regulatory environment for these important and forward-looking business models. My name is Christopher Shipley, and I am an attorney and policy advisor with INCOMPAS. Before we get into the substance of today's webinar, I wanted to take a minute to run through today's agenda and then provide some additional logistical information. In just a few minutes, I will turn the webinar over to our CEO, Chip Pickering, to introduce the other members of the INCOMPAS team and provide an overview of the association's vision, mission, and membership. Then, the INCOMPAS policy team will provide an overview of several major policy issues impacting software as a service, over-the-top, and cloud communications companies. That discussion will include an analysis of the current regulatory and legal environment driving these policy areas, how new regulation and laws could stifle innovation and growth, and will provide additional information about how your company can contribute to our advocacy efforts. After each specific policy issue, and at the end of the webinar, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Questions should be submitted in writing through the interface tool on your Zoom toolbar. We have a member of the policy team standing by to review and present your questions at the appropriate time. With that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce INCOMPAS CEO, Chip Pickering, to begin today's webinar.
Chris, thank you very much. As Chris mentioned, I'm Chip Pickering, CEO of INCOMPAS, and today we have with us Angie Cronenberg, who is the Chief Advocate and General Counsel of INCOMPAS, Karen Reedy, the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs. You just heard from Chris Shipley, our Attorney and Policy Advisor, and then Julia Stroud, Chief of Staff. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our mission and our members. INCOMPAS is the Internet and Competitive Networks Association. We are the leading trade association advocating for competition policy across all networks. We represent internet, streaming, communications, and technology companies of all sizes. We advocate for laws and policies that promote competition, innovation, and economic development. Our members, again, represent competitors in every part of the network economy, communication, and technology companies. We are the catalyst for creating economic growth and improving the quality of life of all Americans through technological innovation, new services, and greater choice for consumers and businesses. Our members deliver managed services, cloud computing, data storage, over-the-top content, and streaming, and all other unique applications that are developed and deployed via broadband networks. With that, I'm going to turn things over for Angie Cronenberg to discuss the regulation and laws that address the OTT and cloud ecosystem. Angie?
Thanks so much, Chip. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Chip indicated, INCOMPAS is the trade association that's representing over-the-top and cloud companies, as well as fiber networks. We're so glad that you're interested in the work that we're doing. It's very important here in Washington as we represent our members, that members of Congress, the FCC, the White House, the NTIA, and other agencies that are playing a role in the development of the internet and the over-the-top businesses understand what it is that our member companies are doing in the marketplace. Through us, we are able to represent to policymakers the services that are being delivered by our members, how those services are being delivered, and the challenges, both the business perspective as well as the regulatory perspective, that are being faced by those service provider members. In turn, we're able to communicate with our service provider members the potential regulations and policies that could impact their business, and ensure that their voices are being heard in Washington as policies are being implemented or considered for implementation. There are a number of things that are underway already or that are already in place that we thought would be of use to you, and we wanted to cover those issues that potentially could impact your business. So the first topic is robocalls, robotexting, and spoofing, as well as network portability, SMS prioritization and spam control policy, net neutrality, and the work that's ongoing on broadband deployment and infrastructure. In turn, Chris Shipley, Karen Reedy, and myself will be discussing these issues in depth. First will be Chris Shipley, who's going to cover a couple of topics. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Angie. Each of the first three topics that I plan to discuss deals in some way with competitive neutrality and ensuring that through our association's advocacy, regulatory frameworks are structured such that competitors and new entrants have the same opportunities afforded as incumbents and legacy technologies. And the first topic that we'd like to get into is robocalling, robotexting, and spoofing. What we're seeing more and more is that industry is seeing increased legislative and regulatory pressure to mitigate unlawful and unwanted contacts. Since 2017, the FCC has opened nearly a dozen proceedings on mitigating and eliminating unlawful and unwanted robocalls. In fact, the Federal Communications Commission has made this issue its #1 consumer priority since Chairman Ajit Pai took over in 2017. Now, INCOMPAS has been an active participant in many of these proceedings on issues such as call blocking, call authentication, spoofing, reassigned numbers and the databases that will keep reassigned numbers, and the application of Truth in Caller ID Act regulations to SMS and MMS text messages. On the legislative side, yesterday, the House of Representatives and the subcommittee examined 7 bills to address robocalls, robotexting, and spoofing. Now, Congress seems to be examining all available solutions to combat this problem, including giving federal agencies more enforcement authority, increasing statutes of limitations to bring complaints against fraudsters, applying Telephone Consumer Protection Act provisions to text messages, and allowing the FCC to issue forfeitures without first issuing a citation. Truly, almost every legislative remedy appears to be on the table with respect to each of these different bills. But specifically on the issue of call authentication, this is a big one for industry and one that INCOMPAS has been very active in. The chairman of the FCC has issued letters on 2 separate occasions to voice service providers calling for the implementation of a caller ID authentication framework by the end of 2019. Now, INCOMPAS has joined this industry effort to deploy what's known as the Stir-Shaken Protocol and framework by the end of 2019. The Stir-Shaken Protocol deals with the handoff of certificates from one service provider to the next. And as an association that represents competitive providers and technology companies, INCOMPAS is seeking to ensure that our members' unique needs are considered and integrated into robocall mitigation efforts, and that any legitimate voice or text traffic that our members are trying to pass is not inadvertently blocked by larger providers also participating in this mitigation. Testing for this Stir-Shaken framework is ongoing, and industry will soon choose policy administrator for this framework. With respect to robocalling, robotexting, and spoofing, the time really is now. SaaS, OTT, and cloud communications companies must play a role in defining the problem and contributing technical solutions. And INCOMPAS has the opportunities and the avenues in order to explore those solutions. So any contribution that your companies can provide to that through membership would be most welcome. I'm happy to stop here and see if there's any questions on the webinar about our efforts in robocalling, robotexting, and spoofing. Well, there's also always an opportunity for questions at the end of the webinar as well. And so what we'll do is we'll move on to our next topic, nationwide number portability. Porting numbers should be transparent, quick, fully automated, and as easy as moving a web domain. And during the past 2 years, the FCC has signaled that it intends to adopt requirements for nationwide number portability. Through an FCC advisory group, the agency has examined various models that provide a theoretical basis for nationwide number portability, looking at factors such as feasibility, cost, and adaptability to changing markets and technologies. That working group has identified 2 models that would allow customers to retain existing numbers without impairing quality, reliability, or convenience when switching providers. And those 2 models are national location routing numbers and internet protocol local routing numbers. National local routing numbers and internet protocol local routing numbers. And our members contribute to these discussions, and INCOMPAS has offered comment to the FCC on the best way forward for competitive service providers. Indeed, again, this is a formative time for this and many issues, and the feedback of the providers represented on this call will be critical to the FCC's eventual model selection. The goal here for INCOMPAS and for our members is to ensure that the selected model addresses the specific challenges not just of our members, but of potential future members like OTT and cloud communications members, who have unique and specific challenges when it comes to porting for enterprise and residential customers. By advocating collectively with INCOMPAS, companies concerned about this important issue can truly control their telecom identity by championing a solution that works best for competitive providers. As I noted, there'll be plenty of opportunities for questions at the end of the webinar, so please do feel free to submit some. But let's move on finally to SMS prioritization and spam control policy. INCOMPAS has a long track record of championing interconnection policy that ensures that competitive service providers have the throughput capability to deliver broadband, voice, and information services like SMS in a timely manner. And as I mentioned previously, INCOMPAS's advocacy has a keen focus on competition issues and ensuring a level regulatory playing field for competitors. With that in mind, we've recently begun to get involved in issues relating to SMS prioritization and spam control. As you know, messaging aggregators serve as the middleman between application providers and wireless service carriers. These companies are ultimately responsible for developing the messaging infrastructure that relays communications from application providers through wireless networks. And several of our members have approached us recently about their concerns about some of this messaging infrastructure. Specifically, firewall and spam filtering rules that serve special interests and might have a detrimental impact on the delivery of lawful traffic, and the decision about which messages make it to consumers on a timely basis, if at all. This fits right into INCOMPAS's traditional avenues of advocacy, because as an advocate for competition policy, INCOMPAS opposes arrangements that lead to the discrimination of lawful content. And we will work with all new members, new OTT and cloud communications members, to craft policies that will ensure fair competition. Again, as I've noted before, I'm happy to take any questions about those issues, but for the time being, I'm going to pass it on to Angie to talk a little bit at this point about net neutrality.
Thanks, Chris. Net neutrality policy ensures that consumers and small businesses can reach the internet content of their choice without interference from their internet service provider. Historically, the FCC has been the agency enforcing net neutrality, including rules that prohibit blocking, throttling, and third-party paid prioritization. It also provided oversight of the business practices of internet service providers, including a general conduct standard that ensured that ISPs do not engage in behavior that would threaten the availability of an open internet and consumers and small businesses' ability to access that open internet. The FCC had oversight over ISPs' interconnection practices with internet and content providers in the ecosystem, including, for example, CDNs and transit providers. INCOMPAS has been a long supporter of strong net neutrality policy, working on the various FCC proceedings to shape the profession. In 2017, however, Trump's FCC repealed net neutrality, leaving in place only a rule requiring ISPs to publicly disclose their business practices. Encompass is the leading trade association appealing the repeal in court. The court has now been fully briefed and oral arguments occurred in early February. We are expecting a court decision anytime this summer, and Encompass will remain engaged in any further court process. In the meantime, Encompass is leading an effort in Congress for a bipartisan legislative solution. We helped shape and supported Republican legislation introduced last Congress that fully embraced the net neutrality protections in a new title of the Communications Act. And we also support the Save the Internet Act the Democratic leaders in Congress introduced this year that would reinstate the FCC's prior net neutrality protection. One of our board members recently testified in support of the Save the Internet Act, and we were instrumental in preparing him and participating in that process. We anticipate that there could be some movement towards a bipartisan solution after the court decision, and Encompass is representing its members' interests on the legislative language that could become the permanent net neutrality policy for the United States. Without these reinstated protections, ISPs are in the position to make demands of OTT and cloud providers who need to reach the ISP's consumers and small businesses in order for their businesses to be successful. Without rules in place to ensure that consumers and small businesses can reach the cloud, your businesses are at threat. We're in the position to shape net neutrality policy for the future, and our members have the privilege and opportunity to work with us to help shape that policy. And if that's something that you're willing to join us in. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take it, either now or at the end of the webinar. Not seeing any questions coming in, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Karen. Karen?
Thanks, Angie. Encompass continues to work for policies that support the build out of new networks so that end users, including over-the-top providers, have choices for their underlying carrier and service provider. Our focus so far has been on wireline and wireless, specifically small cell, build out. In particular, we are strong advocates for policies that reduce the cost and streamline the processes, thereby reducing the time for deployment of fiber and small cells. In response to the advocacy of ours and with those we joined forces, the FCC has taken significant positive steps in these areas. Namely, they adopted a one-touch make-ready policy for pole attachments and established shot clocks and limitation on fees related to permitting and siting for small cells. Going forward, we plan to work on expanding the reach of these good policies, which will require a lot of Hill effort as well as our efforts at the FCC. For example, there are some poles over which the FCC does not have jurisdiction. Congressional action may be needed to get one-touch make-ready policies extended to those poles. Also, we would like to see some of the policies adopted with regard to small cells clearly apply to fiber deployment. Broadband deployment will continue to be a priority issue at Encompass, as we have fiber builders and their vendors as members. It has been and is expected to continue to be a big priority at the FCC. Broadband deployment is also a bipartisan objective of Congress. The President and members of Congress met this week on a proposal, $2 trillion infrastructure initiative that would include broadband deployment. All of this is critical to the U.S. winning the race to 5G, which is a clear national priority. Importantly, it is a topic of much discussion internally here at Encompass, and we welcome new voices to that discussion. Membership at Encompass will provide you that voice. I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions.
At this time, feel free to write any questions you may have on any of the other topics that we've mentioned, or any questions about membership. We'd be happy to take those now. Okay, we don't see any. I'm going to hand it over to Chip Pickering, our CEO.
But I want to thank everyone for giving us your time today. And as we think through the Encompass cause and mission, we'd like to ask you to join in the work that we do, the principles that I believe that we share, and the purpose of creating greater competition across all networks, the innovation, the investment, the economic development. I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of Encompass membership. We are approaching our 40th birthday. We started in 1981. We're the founding voice of competition. As we brought competition or helped bring competition to the long distance industry, then in 1996, to all parts of the telecom industry, as all elements of the market, long, local, and others were open to competition. We've then fought to maintain, preserve, and protect the principles of competition policy as technologies evolve. So the benefits over a long period of time as we go into the future would include weekly policy updates and information. There's an opportunity to have information sharing with a broader community. We also have small working groups that convene and gather on issues of common interest. And it allows you to come to the Hill, go to the FCC, and engage and have opportunities to advocate and tell the story of your particular community, your company, and the issues that are important to you. We also have a very vibrant business and networking element of Encompass for our members. We expand network sales and partnering opportunities. We provide greater brand visibility through Encompass, our website, our newsletter, social media. We have two major events a year, a policy summit in the spring of the year, where we gather and have leading industry and policymakers share information, provide content, and have an opportunity for our members to then go to the Hill and the FCC to engage in member-to-member, committee-to-committee, and commission advocacy. Then this fall, we have the Encompass 2019 show, which will be in Louisville, Kentucky, November 4th through the 6th. And it's a great opportunity to hear leading industry thinkers as they create the content, talk about policy, and the business models and opportunities of the future. We welcome you to join us in Louisville, and we hope that you'll join us.
Thank you, Chip. As it turns out, we did have a question, and we wanted to make sure that that question got an answer. The question that came in to us was about the shaken and stir framework with respect to robocalling, robotexting, and spoofing. And the question is, the FCC's policy efforts to encourage carriers to implement the shaken framework as a tool to stop caller ID spoofing is very good policy. However, the current shaken framework may create significant advantage for large carriers with IMS or Internet Multimedia Subsystem networks. Providers who have TDM interconnects or cannot facilitate SIP interconnects that are shaken ready will not be able to benefit from the shaken trust framework. Is this an issue being considered by Encompass? And the answer is absolutely. The industry efforts that Encompass has joined is a board of directors called the Secure Telephone Identity Governance Authority. And that board of directors has representatives from a number of different industry trade associations and companies on it, all considering these issues. And Encompass was asked to participate in this effort as a representative of national CLECs and of competitive providers in general. And as you noted, the stir-shaken framework applies right now primarily to IP-enabled networks and not to TDM. And so one of the things and one of the reasons that Encompass was asked to come on board was to highlight those very issues for the board of directors and for their technical advisory committee to ensure that when the stir-shaken framework is tested and then when it is eventually launched, it does have those kinds of solutions in place for those networks, so that those networks can pass those certificates and participate in the framework and the protocol. We're currently in a situation where the board of directors is selecting what's known as a policy administrator, or the actual entity that will facilitate the stir shaken framework. And obviously, we will be working not just with the board of directors to continue to bring up these issues about those companies that can't necessarily transfer the certificates in the stir shaken framework. Not just with the board, but then also with this policy administrator to ensure that when the stir shaken framework is adopted, hopefully by the end of 2019, that everyone's perspectives are taken into consideration. And I can say in good confidence that the companies and the associations that are represented on the board understand that issue, are focused on solving it, and appreciate the work that Encompass and some of the other small associations and providers are doing to bring that issue to light. So appreciate the question. I hope that answers. If not, I'm certainly happy to take additional questions on that issue offline once the webinar is over. I can be reached at 602-909-2987 or 202-872-5746.
Thank you, Chris. In case this is helpful as a follow-up to that question, Encompass has been a trade association that has long been involved in what's called the IP transition and ensuring that our member companies' business interests are being understood by the policymakers and others like this board understand what's really going on down at the business to ensure everyone's business interests are taken into consideration. With that, we have one more question?
Yeah, we actually did, and appreciate this question as well. I think it complements the last question. Please feel free to continue to submit. I joined the webinar to learn about present tense issues about over-the-top and cloud regulatory issues. These platforms utilize the protocol TCP/IP. The other issue presented today were related to TDM and SMS/MMS protocols with IP aggregators or spoofers in the middle utilizing IP to conduct their fraud. What I would like Encompass to focus upon is not fixing the TDM and SMS/MMS present issue, yet focus on moving all communication to TCP/IP, creating a future path to TCP/IP. And I think that is I'm going to let Angie talk about that in just a second, but I think that's very fair. I just wanted to, I think right now Encompass is actually trying to ensure that we're bringing along all of our competitive providers, at least on the stir shaken front, while also focusing on the future and ensuring that our members are a part of this TCP/IP future. But I'm happy to let Angie talk a little bit more.
It actually goes right to the heart of what I was saying. Probably typing the question is I was reassuring that we are the only trade association in Washington, D.C. that is focusing on the network issues with respect to competitors. The incumbent operators have a number of associations that look out for their interests, but Encompass is the only one who's working directly with competitive fiber providers, voice providers, over-the-top providers to ensure that their interests are being considered in Washington. So we'd be happy to work with you in your business and would love to talk to you some more. If you wouldn't mind giving Chris, who gave out his phone number, a call after the session, we'd love to chat with you some more about that.
Yeah, there's another question coming in. How is the FCC's National Number Portability Project affecting those companies providing porting data today? Well, I wanted to, if the nationwide number portability section was a bit off, I apologize. The FCC is currently looking at the feasibility of doing nationwide number portability right now. And what they have received from the North American Numbering Council, which is the Commission's advisory group dealing with numbering issues, nationwide number portability, is they have received a final draft on the two models that I described earlier, the national local routing number model, and then the Internet Protocol local routing number model as well. So there is no direct impact today of the nationwide number portability work that's going on, but it certainly is, the Commission, as I noted, has signaled that its interest from a consumer perspective is to move towards nationwide number portability as quickly as possible. what the commission had done previously was announced a notice of proposed rulemaking in which it had sought comment on each of these different models, and I believe that it is considering those models, but only based on the recommendations of the North American Numbering Council. And the report itself that was submitted to the commission provided, as I noted, discussion about the feasibility and costs and considerations about payment and the reporting infrastructure itself, but didn't necessarily make any recommendations one way or another about a preferred model. So, while I do believe the FCC is moving steadily toward a conclusion to this, there's nothing imminent in terms of those companies that are providing porting data right now.
Do we have any other questions? Again, thank you for joining us today. We'd love you to join our calls. We look forward to following up. Please give Julia Stroud or anyone on the Encompass team an email or a call. We're glad to answer any further questions and then to explore how we can work together, hopefully as a member company, but in a coalition to advance all the issues discussed. So thank you very much.